Welcome. My name is Sarah Dexter, and I am a admissions and recruitment specialist at the Brown Schools. Today's topic will be tips for submitting your best application. We've already received a couple questions in advance, but if you have questions that come up along the way, then definitely feel free to use the chat function on your page, and we can answer those towards the end of the session today. Here we have two of our current students with us, Aishwarya and Kellen. If you tuned into the last session, then you may remember them as well. But if you could each introduce yourself, your name, hometown, year, and concentration area.
Perfect. Hi everyone, my name is Aishwarya Nagar and I'm a second-year Master of Public Health student with a specialization in global health, and I am originally from New Delhi, India.
Hi everyone, I'm Kellen. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm a first-year MSW MBA joint degree student, and I am studying health.
Awesome, thank you so much, and welcome. So as I mentioned, today we're really going to be talking about tips for your best application. One of my primary roles is not only answering questions about the application process, but also reviewing applications from our prospective students. From my experience, I can tell you we get a lot of different questions about how to submit your strongest application for this program. So I know the process can be a little intimidating. It can feel overwhelming at times. For some folks, it can feel like a second job for all the time and effort they put into it. But hopefully this session can really be a time to gather some tips and also relieve some anxieties that you may have. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll begin with some basics. The Brown School's first priority early action deadline is December 15th. Those applying to this deadline receive priority consideration for admissions and scholarship, and then they receive their decision by February 1st. They will also have full access to apply to Master Research Fellowships, which will be open for application on December 15th. The next deadline is March 1st, which is regular decision, at which point students will receive the next round or priority consideration for admissions and scholarships. Applications are reviewed for admissions and scholarships based on availability. So throughout the application process, we encourage folks to apply as early as possible. However, if you're unable to apply by the December 15th deadline, no need to worry. We accept, again, on a rolling admission. So we encourage you to submit your strongest application, even if that means waiting an extra week or so. So next up, I want to give a quick review of the application requirements. You can see that we require the following, which are transcripts, a resume or CV, a personal statement, 3 letters of recommendation, and then a video interview for merit-based scholarships. We'll go into detail on each of these, but you'll also note there are some slight differences between the MSW and the MPH application. For the MSW, we require an additional analytical essay, and then for the MPH, you will apply through SOFAs, and we'll need the GRE for the MPH application. So for international applicants, we require transcripts to be in English, so it may be necessary for you to have a transcript officially translated by one of these services. For MPH applicants, you'll be required to have your transcripts fully evaluated by WES and sent to SOFAs, the application platform we use for MPH applicants. For both programs, we require the TOEFL or IELTS as demonstration of English proficiency. There are limited exceptions for this requirement. For example, if you're an international student that has completed at least 3 years of undergraduate education in the US, or another country with English as the official language. You will also be required to provide proof of financial support only once you've been admitted to the program. If you have questions about these things, of course, reach out to our office, and we're very happy to answer those questions and provide support. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about dual degree programs and requirements. We believe our dual degree options are really valuable for those interested in the intersection of social well-being and health outcomes or social policy. Since both programs are housed within the Brown School, you will seamlessly have access to all the resources you need to succeed all right here. For MSW and MPH, you will need to apply to both programs separately. and be admitted separately. However, you will only have one interview for the merit-based scholarship. For the MSP dual degree, you can apply during your first or second year of your initial program, so either your MSW or MPH, and begin after completing the initial degree requirements. So then moving on to joint degree requirements, we also have a number of joint degree options within our school and the WashU community. For more information on these, you can check out our website, but you can see the full list here of all of our different degree programs. Again, you will want to apply to programs individually in order to be admitted into both. Those are separate admission review processes between those two programs. You'll also apply separately for financial aid and scholarship. And then you'll also want to indicate that you're applying for a joint degree program in your application for the Brown School. So I wanted to ask Helen, can you share a little bit about your experiences applying to a joint degree?
Absolutely. So I applied when I was anticipating on coming to the Brown School. I applied to both the Brown School for the social work degree, and as Sarah mentioned, I sent my application to the Olin Business School. And so it was somewhat grueling in that you had to write 2 analytical essays, get recommendations for each program separately, and so there was a lot of nitty-gritty work that went into that. But one thing that I found really helpful is I would, if I'm talking to someone who's applying to a dual degree program, I would say identify the professional route you would like to take or put more influence in first, and put the majority of your strengths to that program, because you can always reapply or just send in an application during your first year of study in whatever that program is. And so I ended up doing a little bit more work than was necessary when I applied, because I applied to both programs at the exact same time. And it turns out that the business school doesn't allow deferment in their application process. And so I have to reapply again this year and go through that whole process in order to be readmitted into that program. So I could have, put a little bit more strong application forward to the MSW program. So I would just be conscious of that and ask that question when you're going through that process.
Yeah, that's some really great insight. Thank you for sharing that, Helen. And that turned out to be a new thing that the school wasn't, that Olin wasn't able to defer.
Yeah.
So we apologize for that, but we're glad you're here.
He's here now.
Yeah,
I made it.
And so I think that's a really good point, is that you're very welcome to apply to other programs during your first year or second year of your program within the Brown School, the MSW or MPH.
Yep.
And so I think that's a good point, is really focusing maybe on that application where your
heart lies.
Yes.
Where your heart lies.
Beautiful way to put it, where your heart is. Really focusing on that so you can have the strongest application for that program. Awesome, thank you. So now we want to talk a little bit more about our holistic review process. So for us, this means that we look at each applicant as an individual, and we really carefully consider each part in the application process in a comprehensive way. And we balance each of these parts. So that means that, yes, we do certainly consider your GPA, your academic transcript, your GPA or standardized tests if you're doing the MPH. But we also look very deeply into your essays, your letters of recommendation, and overall professional experience. Here are some questions you can ask yourself when you're working on your application. So are you passionate about addressing racial, social, and economic disparities and inequalities? How can you share that in different ways throughout your application? Are you willing to challenge and be challenged? How do you approach teamwork and collaboration? And then, are you able to articulate your values, even if you don't know exactly what professional role you'll apply them to? And then, of course, are you willing to learn and grow as a scholar, practitioner, and advocate? So these are some things to think about when you're completing your application through your essays, your letters, and your video interview for scholarship. So a holistic review is really designed to build a community of individuals whose unique set of personal experiences, previous leadership roles, and professional aspirations will flourish within and enhance our outstanding community of advocates activists and leaders guided by a social mission. So it's really with the holistic review process is really there to cultivate a wonderful group of people and of students to learn and grow from each other. So I wanted to ask Aishwarya, can you comment on how this holistic approach shapes your experience in the classroom and among your overall cohort?
For me, it was important to apply to a program like the Brown School that has a holistic review process because I was terrified that maybe my GRE wasn't good enough, maybe my personal statement wasn't good enough, my GPA wasn't good enough, and those things would have restricted me from applying and receiving this incredible education. And I think that applies to my peers as well. Some of these things some of these skills you bring to the program, some of these aspirations, hopes, and dreams, it would be a shame to not have some of the people in my cohort just because they were judged based solely on their GRE score, based solely on their ability to get a GPA above a certain threshold. So for me, it has done exactly what you said. It has helped me surround myself with people who are defined by their incredible ambitions and by their global aspirations, by their interests that are so deeply entrenched in community values of equity, and not just, you got a good GRE score or you wrote like a really, really good personal statement or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's a lot of values and there's great capacity that can be hard to be measured by a score or by a GPA. Yeah. And so we'll talk more about this, but we don't have a minimum GPA or a minimum GRE score because we understand that there's so much value and opportunity for growth that can't be measured by those numbers. So next we're going to talk a bit about letters of recommendation. So all applicants must submit 3 letters of recommendation. Students often ask who should write their letters, so we have some suggestions if possible, but it's certainly not a requirement. So we suggest an academic, maybe a faculty member, an instructor, a professional recommender, maybe a supervisor of some sort, and then your third one can be either one of those 2. You can see for some considerations, you'll want those recommenders to speak to your capacity for academic curiosity and rigor, your leadership and collaboration skills, and then of course the commitment of field of your interest. So if you're interested in social work or public health, who can speak to those interests and passions of yours? Thinking of, sometimes folks will ask if they should have a faculty member who is within the field of public health but maybe doesn't know them very well. So think about like who truly knows you as a student, who knows your capacity to learn, rather than maybe a faculty member whose class you got an A in, but they don't really know anything super personal about you. Just some of those things to think about, really truly knowing you. And then of course it helps if you've known your recommender for a year or longer, again, because they know you as a person and your capacity to grow and learn. Let's see. So, Kellen, question for you. Can you share some tips about selecting and reaching out to recommenders?
Absolutely. So it's really important, as Sarah, Brianna's my boss here. I get to work with Sarah sometimes. But as Sarah said, it's really important to kind of curate a holistic group of individuals to kind of speak to certain strengths that you have or certain capabilities that you perceive you have and that they can really speak to those. In terms of reaching out, in my case, I did my best to identify and send all of my recommenders what they needed to write a good letter of recommendation. So my resume, a brief statement of what my career goals were, why I thought the Brown School was good. For me personally, I sent that all to them about a month in advance of when I wanted to have my application submitted by, which for me was the early action deadline. That way they can really take the time to craft a letter and then take some time to sit on it and ensure that that's exactly what they want to say to you, and then also give them the capacity to work around their own professional and personal schedules and get that submitted on time. In the past, in other programs I had applied to, I had run into a place where recommenders weren't submitting on time, or I was having trouble getting in contact with them, and that added a lot of stress. So really giving yourself that amount of time to kind of work within and work with them and check up just to make sure that they don't need anything else from you is really important. So I recommend that month-long time frame. And then just I would reiterate once again what Sarah said about identifying those strengths. It's great if you have a very, very good faculty member who you've worked collegially with and that they can just speak to how great you are as a person, but really honing in on the value of leadership and how you present that in the classroom and in the professional work environment. If they can just kind of point to one of those and really get in depth, you have a really great opportunity to present that holistic approach that the Brown School is looking for within their admitted students.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing
Sure.
that. And I think that's very wise, giving that space and that time for folks, because you're asking something from your recommenders. So giving them that time and knowing that you have a full month or whatever that time may be to help alleviate some stress on your end. I think that's really smart. It's a great idea. So next we want to talk a bit about the personal statement. So for both applications, the MPH and MSW, we do require a personal statement. And so we ask you to describe your interest in that given field. And then your essay should be 2 pages, single-spaced, and have the following pieces included below. So talk about what significant factors influence your decision to pursue your degree. Talk about relevant leadership experience that will contribute to your overall success as a graduate student, but also in the profession. What are your career goals, and can you share how you're committed to social change? And then also talk about specific reasons the Brown School is a good fit for your educational and professional goals. In addition, there's some things that you may want to consider. The personal statement is a way for the school and the admissions team to get to know you, to hear your story, and to learn your heart and your passion. So here are some different questions that may help guide the essay you choose to write. So asking yourself, why are you wanting an MSW or MPH or dual or joint degree? Why now? Why is this a good time now? What makes the Brown School the best program for me? As I earn my degree, how will I contribute to the Brown School community? And then after I graduate, how do I anticipate that my MSW or MPH will help me create a positive impact? How do I think I'm going to succeed in the future, and what sorts of things do I see myself doing? Asking yourself these questions, I think, really helps tell your story, show us what you're passionate about, and then honestly get to know you better as an individual, and help us review your application holistically and see you for the person that you are. So, Aishwarya, do you have any tips that you could share about crafting a personal statement?
Yeah, I had to dig through my memory to remember what I wrote. But I remember starting off with why public health was something I was interested in, and why I wanted to earn my MPH, what got me into public health. Then I remember talking about relevant leadership experiences with classroom curricula. And then I went straight into why the Brown School was the place for me, but kind of phrased it as a mutually beneficial opportunity. What could the Brown School do for me, but what could I do for the Brown School community? And then ended with what my career goals were once this degree was to be achieved. I think it really, really helps when you get your personal statement read by your support system around you. Not only people who know you well and can point out if you've kind of illustrated your passions adequately, but also professionals in your field, or in my case, we had a career center back in my undergraduate institution, and I went to them repeatedly and I talked to them about it. But it is so important to highlight your passion for the field and your passion for this particular program. And for me, it was really important for my personal statement to be well written. So that can mean getting feedback from a whole host of people. But I tried to integrate my own humor into it. There were at least 3 puns. That's a standard minimum for who I am. But yeah, just a well-written essay that communicates exactly why you want to go into this field. And it always helps if you have some sort of a narrative or some sort of like a keystone experience that you integrate into your personal statement. Those would be my main tips.
Yeah, I think those are wonderful tips, and I think you're really right. Just really showcasing yourself and who you are as a person. So if you use puns, if you like humor, then certainly include that in your essay, because you are a person, and we want to see that. Of course, you're not a robot. You wouldn't be coming into this. So I think those are really great tips. Having a well-polished essay and having folks read your essays to know, am I articulating myself in the way I want to? I think those are great points. Thank you. So then for our MSW applicants in particular, we also require an analytical essay. And so for that prompt, we ask you to analyze a social issue that is of great concern to you. So again, this paper should be 2 pages, single space, and should include the following, which is a description of that specific issue and key factors contributing to it, possible solutions to that issue and possible steps for implementation, challenges likely to surface in seeking a solution, and then sources throughout the essay to support your analysis. You can, of course, use the 3rd page for references or works cited. You can also kind of think of this analytical essay as a paper that you might write if you're currently in college or taking undergraduate courses. Think of that sort of level of analysis and critical thinking. So Kellen, if you can think back perhaps to your analytical essay, can you share maybe some tips or thoughts or how you went through this process?
Yeah. I will say one of the biggest challenges, and I'm going to use the word "and" there, opportunities that this essay offers you in your application is the fact that it is very open-ended. So the prompt is not that much of a prompt. It's just what do you care about and why, and what evidence out there in the world says or states that this issue is important, and what room for growth that you have. So it is challenging in that regard, but you have an opportunity to approach it as you would solve that problem, and no one's going to judge you on how you do that, how you think through that. So I think one thing to remember is on the admission side, they're not looking to see if you can write the most perfect essay. They're really trying to understand that you can critically assess and engage in a really complicated issue, because that's what you're going to be doing throughout the entire tenure of your time here at the Brown School, either in social work or in public health. And so that's kind of tip number 1 to remember, is that it's all really about your passion and why. The second piece of advice that I have to it is kind of think outside the box a little bit. Not only state what's been done to solve this issue and how you want to help with that, but try and propose a solution that's out of the box. So if you're coming from an undergraduate background that's not in social work or public health, maybe try and pull some strategies that you've learned and orient that. Try and connect those experiences. The world is your oyster in this critical essay, and so like the personal statement, it's kind of an arena in which you can explore and perform some creativity in who you are as both a person and a student.
Yeah. And then can I ask, do you remember what you wrote your essay on?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello. So as someone who came from both a communication and a healthcare administration background, I really wanted to focus on social determinants of health and how those impede access to healthcare services in an acute care setting. And so I wrote about disparities, particularly in women of color and people along the LGBTQIA+ spectrum, and the barriers that they face in accessing the care that they need. And I approached a solution from how social workers can really be mobilized in immediate acute care settings like an emergency department to help reduce readmissions into hospitals and streamline access to other resources outside, so that we're not in this continuous negative feedback loop of accessing really expensive care that not many people can afford. So that's what my whole essay was, and I was right at the end of the page of the second line. I had written so much about it, and it was so fun to do, but that's kind of what I wrote my paper on.
Yeah, that's great, and I can hear your passion as you talk about it. And I think that's a really good tip. Write about something that you're interested in, that you would like to learn more about, potentially something that you want to do work in. And if you don't want to do work in that, you're not tied to it, of course.
Yeah.
But that may be a bit easier to write about if you're passionate about that area. I would also suggest, because it is such a big prompt, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Maybe try to hone it down a little bit. So you could look at a specific state or community, or a certain population. I think that's a really good tip, as opposed to looking at just like access to healthcare. Really honing it down a bit, so you're not just swimming in this giant ocean of information. So that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Kellen.
Sure.
So next we want to talk a little bit about the standardized test that now is only for MPH folks. So you are required to submit a GRE or some other standardized test. We know this can be a bit stressful for some of our MPH folks. As I briefly mentioned earlier, we do not have a GRE minimum score requirement, but for you folks who like to have some sort of number to gauge, our preferred score is within the 50th percentile for each of these three categories. But it's important to remember that as a part of our holistic review process, the GRE is again just one component of a large application. So for some more details about those score requirements, the scores must be less than 5 years old. We have a specific SOFAS GRE code that you can see on the screen. But also in lieu of a GRE, we do accept the following exams. Again, that are less than 5 years. So the GAT, the GMAT, LSAT, MCAT, PCAT, and USMLE. And again, if you have questions about standardized tests, you can, of course, reach out to us. So then the next piece is transcripts. There are some slightly different processes for the MSW and MPH programs, so I will really quickly review those. So for the MSW, at the time of application, we only require your unofficial transcripts. You can upload these yourself into your application. However, once you're admitted and choose to enroll, we will need to receive official transcripts issued to us directly from your university's registrar offices at that time. For MSW, we'll also need to receive a transcript from any university that you've earned more than 6 credit hours from. So say you took a couple courses over the summer or you transferred. If you had 6 or more credit hours, then we will need a transcript from them. The exception to this is if your primary university transcript lists the credit hours that you've taken elsewhere. Let's see. So for the MPH, sorry, going back real quick. For the MPH, you'll be required to submit your official transcript directly to SOFAS. It will be verified and shown as received to us when we review that. You will never need to send your transcripts directly to the Brown School. Additionally, when we're talking about transcripts, many applicants want to know if we require a minimum GPA. And as I mentioned briefly, we do not have a minimum score. However, we do look we hope for applicants to aim around a 3.0 or above. However, again, we don't have a minimum score. We really truly look at your application holistically. And so if you're concerned that you're not quite at that level, again, there is no minimum GPA for that. So moving on to resume, you'll need to submit a comprehensive resume. There's no page limit, so there's no need to limit your experiences to 1 page. We really want this to be a comprehensive review of your experiences. Your resume should illustrate experiences during or post-undergraduate, unless there's a specific high school experience that really inspired or initiated your path towards a career in social work or public health. So thinking about your undergraduate career and moving forward. And on that resume, we encourage you to put volunteer experiences, leadership, professional, and research experiences. As someone who reviews applications, I encourage you to put it all there, and we'll be the ones to decide what counts. So if you're unsure if you should put something on your resume, I suggest just go ahead and put it on there. Let's see. Oh, as a quick note, we're actually coming towards the end of our presentation point. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat function in the next couple of minutes, because we'll be getting to them pretty quickly. Okay, so moving back, now I'm going to talk about the merit-based scholarship interview piece. So as I mentioned, again, a part of our application process is the required online or video interview for anyone wishing to be considered for merit-based scholarships. So this really gives the review committee a chance to get to know a little bit more about you, and we believe the online video format provides our applicants flexibility to complete the interview at their convenience. This is a screenshot of the interview platform we use it's pretty self-explanatory, and well, we hope, and we hope that it can be just a pretty welcoming and engaging process for applicants as well. You'll see that there are 5 questions for your MSW or MPH applicants, and then there's 6 questions for those dual degree applicants. It's important to note there's no right or wrong answers. It's truly just an avenue for the admissions committee to get to know you, hear your story, and really see that passion that you have for the field that you're hoping to go into. So now I wanted to open it back up to Kellen. So you completed the video interview.
Yes, I did.
Can you share a little bit about your experience with the interview process and maybe any tips you have?
Yeah. So like with any interview, you'll want to make sure that when you're presenting yourself on camera, you're dressed as you would be for an interview. So just not your yogurt stained pajama shirt. Just the little things that you take into consideration that are somewhat obvious. I will say, don't scrutinize too much about how you're looking directly into the camera. If you need to look off camera to really think about your thoughts, please feel free to do that, particularly with this type of format. I will say, when I was doing this interview, it was somewhat surprising and a little bit jarring to me because I saw video interview on the welcome email, and I was like, great, I'm a Skype interview, I'm a rocket out of the ballpark, and it's going to be great, they're going to love me. And it's truly a video interview, so you're going to be presented with videos of review committee members asking you randomized questions, and there's no order to that question. There's no way to kind of perceive a list of what questions are being asked. And then there's going to be about a 45-second to a minute and a half, depending on the question period, for which you can prepare an answer. So I would recommend having a paper on a desk to write some thoughts down. And then it's going to jump right into recording. So there's no buttons you need to push. And so you just record your response and then click submit. Don't worry about it. There's no review function, so you can't scrutinize over that a whole lot. So just be prepared for that. There is a practice function that you can engage in before you begin the actual interview process, and I would highly recommend that you take advantage of that. Other than that, just be yourself as you would in any interview and present your answers with as much passion as you might have for that. And those are my tips.
Yeah, I think those are really awesome tips. Thank you for sharing that. I think not scrutinizing over your answers and giving yourself that grace and that understanding that you did your best with the resources and materials that you had, I think is really important. And I want to emphasize, as someone who reviews these things, it's truly only an asset. It's wonderful to be on the receiving end of this, and an honor to really get to know you and your stories a little bit better and actually see your passion on your face and in your voice. It's a really, really cool thing. So I understand that can be intimidating and a bit nerve-wracking, but understanding the person who's reviewing that on the other side is wanting you to succeed and wanting you to do well and excited to hear what it is you have to say. And also I would encourage doing that practice function beforehand just to get used to the platform, because I imagine you're not doing these sort of interviews day in and day out all the time. So that would probably be just a helpful side note. So for next steps, that's all we have for the application piece materials. But for your next steps, the applications are open. You can see how to access our MSW application, brownschool.worcester.edu/MSW apply, and then similarly for the MPH application, brownschool.worcester.edu/MPH apply. As you know, our deadlines are coming up. Our priority deadlines are December 15th, which is the early action, March 1st for regular, and then after March 1st, we accept on rolling admissions. So I guess now we'll get into some of our questions. So we have a list of questions that we received beforehand, so I'm going to start off with those and just go in order of what we received. So the first question is, how do you all suggest we really express our interest in our personal statement beyond answering the prompt? So we touched on this a little bit. I think from a reviewer standpoint, it's really important to hear your story, to come through as a person. Follow the prompt. I can't emphasize that enough, but the prompt's there for a reason. Truly answer the prompt. the best you can. You can be as blunt as saying, my goal in social work is blank. If you want to say it that way, you can totally say that. That you can't be too forward or too clear with what you're saying for us to read. But again, really just sharing your story and who you are, I think that really goes a long way, and we'll be able to see your passion within your essay. The next question is, can you describe the kind of students WashU's programs look for / recruits? So I would say we really value diversity in our cohorts and in the students that we recruit. I wouldn't say that there's technically like an ideal candidate. We get that question.
It's me.
For sure.
You are pretty cool, I guess.
But I think we want you to be passionate about the fields that you're pursuing, so social work, public health, social policy. We want you to be excited to learn, willing to be challenged, able to work with people collaboratively, because you're going to be doing that in the field. I think that's a question I receive a lot, but it's hard. I want to say, if you have a heart for social justice and for making the world a better place, then I think you're kind of our ideal candidate. So, the next one is there financial assistance available for MPH students through teaching and research assistantship? So yes, there are master research fellowships that you can apply for. Those come out those are posted mid-December. And so if you apply for that early decision application, then you also will have access to those master research fellowships during that time as well. The next question, along the same vein, is research experience in undergraduate study important when being considered for admission to the MPH program? So that's something we certainly look for. We look at your research experience. If you have it, we encourage you to partake in research if that's of interest to you. But if that's maybe not something you're super interested in or focused on, then that's okay too. There's other experiences, both paid and unpaid, that are equally as valuable.
I'd like to add to the research assistantship question. Traditionally, we do think of TAs as a financial assistantship opportunity, but those opportunities are very limited at the Brown School. There's only a couple of classes here and there that you can be a TA for. Those positions are usually for PhD students. However, in terms of research assistantships, if you do not apply for a master's research fellowship or get one, there are part-time research assistant opportunities that you can apply for throughout the year. So that is how I am funding my living expenses here in St. Louis, for instance. And those applications are center to center, professor to professor, but we do have a career services portal where you can find them. And during orientation week, there's copious numbers of fairs where you can find part-time opportunities that are research focused.
Yes, thank you so much for adding that. That's a really important piece, that there's additional opportunities throughout your time as a student. And Ashwari would know, because she does this. Those are great. Let's see. Okay, so this next one's about recommendation letters. Is it better for an academic letter of recommendation to come from a professor you have had multiple times, or from a professor you had once in class that you performed particularly well in? So I think that's a good question. I think it really depends on your relationship with that professor, that faculty member. If the faculty member knew you well because you had them in multiple classes, or they had you in multiple classes, then they may be able to speak to your experiences a little bit better. But if you got to know that other professor that you had once because you did research with them or you had a mentoring relationship with them, then they may be stronger. So thinking about who have you known longer, who knows you better, who can speak to your strengths, your leadership capabilities, your collaboration, thinking of those things, who would be able to write that strongest letter, hopefully can help you decide which person to choose. And you have 3 letters or 3 folks to choose from, so maybe it is you use both. Kind of depends on what makes sense for you. So another question about the letters. Do you accept already written recommendations from recommenders or do you accept online recommenders to fill out recommendations in your online portal? So yes, we prefer them to do the online portal. What it'll be is you will put in their contact information, and then the portal will send them a link to access their portal to upload their recommendation letter and a couple other pieces. If you have trouble, if they're having trouble accessing that link, then they can certainly reach out to us, the Brown School, and we can help troubleshoot any issues that come from there. But yes, we definitely recommend for you to do the online portion for the recommenders. Another question. So this one's going to be for Kellen. What was the most important point when you prepared your personal statement?
For me, I really focused on two things. So I was coming from a different graduate level background that I wasn't vibing with, so to speak. And so for me, in my personal statement, I wanted to highlight that and kind of present the opportunity that why social work and what the Brown School had to offer, why that was important for me at my particular point in my life. So that was number one. And number two is again, how, as Ashwarya put it so beautifully, how I can grow within the Brown School, what they can do for me, and also what I can do for the Brown School, and also as an extension, the St. Louis community. Because you're going to really focus on how to address social disparity and inequity here in the St. Louis community as well as beyond. So really just focusing on why this career path is important for you. And I want to touch on a little bit of like that personal narrative piece. It's okay to kind of present that importance in just one moment of your life. It doesn't have to be this grandiose revelation that you've had at the base of a tree or, like it can just be, like for me personally, I worked with this one patient and it was a really challenging experience, and I thought, I am not doing the right thing. What do I need to do? Mm-hmm. So something so simple can launch you on a trajectory, and that's the important thing that you should articulate in that personal statement.
Yeah, I think you said it. That's perfect. Thank you. So the last pre-submitted question we have is, what kind of GPA are you looking for? And so we've touched on this a bit, but again, we don't have a minimum GPA. That's really a part of our holistic process. But if you're a numbers person, if you want to know, then we do look for our applicants to have around a 3 or above out of 4. But if you're not at that point and you're really concerned about that, I just want to remind you that we do a holistic process, mm-hmm. and so you're not defined by your GPA, you're not defined by your GRE test score. It's only one piece of a much bigger application review that we do. So those are all of our pre-questions. I'm going to set this down so I'm not loud with it because I fidget. So now we're going to take some questions from the audience. So the first question is, I'm deeply interested in racial equity and social justice, but I have no clue exactly what I want to do professionally. What's the best way to approach my application? I think that's a really good question. If either of you have thoughts, you can certainly share, but I can start with that. Mm-hmm. If you're unsure for social work versus public health, I would encourage you maybe to learn a bit more about those fields individually and just see where your heart's at, see where you find your passion lies, and maybe it's both, and so then maybe you choose to apply to both of those. For the MPH, you are required to take the GRE, so if that may be something to think about if you're not interested in taking that test score. But I think really just figuring out what it is that within social equity or social justice that you're passionate about. Is that perhaps working with youth? Is that working with a specific population? Is that working within a specific area like a school or in a hospital? Or where is that kind of just helping narrow down that interest? But it doesn't have to be super narrow, because that's a big part of graduate school, mm-hmm. is figuring out mm-hmm. what it is you're really passionate about. I think mm-hmm. you're in a great place to start. Maybe doing just a little more like soul searching within yourself. Do either of you have any suggestions?
I think one way to approach that question is so this question says, I don't exactly know what I want to do, but I'm deeply interested in it. So what has happened in your life that has made that deeply meaningful for you? I'm hopeful that deep interest has stemmed from somewhere. So if you touch on that as you approach your application, that's the best way to approach it. Just why are you deeply interested? You don't need to know the where and the who and the how, but the why, and the rest will come as you're here. That's, as Sarah said, what this is for. So, I mean, it does help to kind of refine that, but that's by no means like an assessment tool. It's just kind of projecting your pathway. So really focus on that why it's important. So state I'm deeply interested in. I'm exploring that, but here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that just because you say maybe you're interested in working with youth or a specific population, it doesn't mean that you have to pursue that once you're here. We understand that people grow and change, and that's what graduate school is about. So for our next question, do you have students who go on to do clinical level work, particularly therapy? And the second piece is, do you help prepare students to earn an LMSW? So short answer, yes. Quite a few of our students go on to work in direct practice or clinical level work through therapy, counseling, case management, and so on. And then there are a number of ways that students are prepared to help gain that licensure, not only inside the classroom from your faculty members, but also there's a number of professional developments. We have an office of career services that are there to help connect you to resources, and then just the community overall, just chatting with your peers, colleagues, faculty members. There's just a lot of informal support as well. So the next question, what do you mean by comprehensive resume? It's another good question. So it may look a bit different depending on where you're at in your career, be that school, work experiences, what have you. But really just looking back, I'll say post or undergraduate education and beyond, looking at those paid or volunteer experiences that you think are relevant to the given field, social work or public health. So again, that could be paid, that could be volunteer, that could be research, but any of those sort of experiences that you think would be helpful to include. And if you have specific questions about that, or you want a more in-depth answer, certainly reach out to us and we can help provide some more clarity.
For me, I didn't have very many public health specific experiences to show on my resume, but the skills or the strengths that I thought were relevant to the field, I included experiences that exhibited those on my resume. So maybe that's one way to interpret comprehensive.
Yeah, yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really good point is, for example, someone in public health or social work could have an education background or just different customer service or social service, working with people, doing different sort of research. Maybe it's a bit more medical focused, a number of different things. My suggestion is if you're not sure, just go ahead and put it on there. Because again, we're looking at you as an individual holistically. And so honestly, all of your experiences have worth. So that's a really good point. Thank you. So the next question, would you recommend submitting GRE scores I already have to the MSW program? Even if it's not required, might it help my application at all? So we don't require the GRE score. You can add that as an attachment, like that's certainly an option, like you are able to submit that, but that's not something we really review, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Next question. If I touch upon a social issue in my personal statement as a reason why I'm interested in social work, should I write an analytical essay about the same or different topic? It's another good question. I think you could certainly go either way. I have certainly reviewed applications that are both. If it's something that you talk about in your personal statement, maybe that means you're really passionate about it. And so from that, you could draw a really strong essay. So that may be helpful to you, but maybe you're passionate about a lot of things and you want to talk about something else. I think that's okay. Whatever you feel makes the most sense for you and feels the best, you should do that, certainly. So the next question, if I have dual credit classes that I took in high school, do I need to get transcripts from those universities, or will my undergrad transcripts suffice? So I believe if those classes are already on your undergraduate transcript, which I think most transcripts are, then you should be okay. However, it may be worthwhile just to touch base with us, like give our office a call or an email to just make sure that's taken care of. But that's not a good question. So I'm not sure if this is our last one or not, but this question is, what is the appeal to applying early action? So yes, we talk about this early action deadline a lot. And so what does that mean? Basically, that means that you will receive, so if you apply by December 15th, you will receive your decision by February 1st, as well as your award letter and any sort of scholarships you received. You will also, because it's early action, that means that all of our scholarships and funding have not been allotted yet. So we admit, or we allot scholarships kind of as on a rolling basis after that. So if you apply by December 15th, then you have access to just all of the scholarship opportunities that are available.
Can I chime in on that?
Yes, please.
So I did my best to apply by the early action deadline because of the bigger, you're given more priority to being considered for that more of that merit-based scholarship. But it also really helps you if you're really considering the Brown School as the home for your graduate level study, which I certainly hope most of you would be, because we are a very great, meaningful place. That early action deadline gets you your decision faster, and then you can mobilize on all of the resources that we have available to you to making sure that you kind of streamline into our community as best as possible and as well prepared for graduate study as you can be along the financial route. So for the Brown School last year, our FAFSA deadline, the federal application for student financial aid, was due March 1st. And so if you receive your decision by February 1st, you can streamline that application right away, get that resource lined up, and that also helps you be considered for need-based scholarship, which is the exact same deadline. And so I didn't quite get on my applications as fast as I could have, and so I missed that need-based scholarship deadline. And so you can really kind of think about some of those longer-term financial necessities that come along with that application if your primary application is out of the way. So that's just one piece of advice I would offer.
I think that's a really helpful and really wise advice. I also want to build off of that. If I know we keep saying this December 15th deadline, and maybe you're waiting on a recommendation letter that doesn't come in until December 17th, or it's not going to come in until January 1st. That's okay too. Like I don't want you to get too worried or anxious about that, because overall the earlier the better. But we also want you to submit your strongest application. So kind of keeping those two things in mind. If you need that extra week or 2 weeks, then that's completely okay. Because we want you to put your best foot forward and submit your strongest application and be able to truly shine. So those were all of our questions. We're going to talk a little bit about next steps. Our next virtual info session will be Wednesday, November 28th. And there, my colleague will be talking about student research opportunities. You can get more information on those virtual info sessions, both upcoming and already recorded, at brownschool.woostel.edu/info. And then, of course, there's my information. Again, I'm Sarah Dexter, Admissions and Recruitment Specialist. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me at sdexter@woostel.edu. And then we're gonna be a ton of places, so come meet us. We would love to see your face and answer questions and get to know you. We're gonna be in a lot of different areas. These are most of them, but we're gonna be at an Idealist Fair in Los Angeles later this week, or
Today.
Today. Don't even know what day it is. There'll be some TIFF fairs, some various conferences and organizational fairs, college fairs throughout the country, all the way from Seattle, Washington to Arizona and Michigan, and everywhere in between. And then if you're an Illinoisian, we'll be hitting you up as well. We're going to be doing an I-74 trek throughout a ton of different cities in Illinois, and we would love to meet you. Actually, my hometown is in Decatur, Illinois, and we'll be going there as well. So if you're from Decatur, what up? I'm excited to go there. Anyways, I just want to thank Aishwarya and Kellen for joining us. They're such wonderful, wonderful students and Brown School community members. And I want to thank you all for joining us here today. If you have any questions, please certainly reach out to us either through my email, the office number, or of course our admissions email as well. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.